Welcome to the What's Your Truth podcast, the show that not only showcases the best of independent artists, but also explores what inspires them, what drives them, and what they consider their fundamental purpose as an artist to be. Today on the show, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Tommy Luce. Now, as long as I've known Tommy, and it's been a few years, he's always been a hustler. A performing musician for the past 3 decades, Tommy got his preliminary musical chops on piano and tuba, eventually finding his way to the guitar. He's released six albums with the metal band Smokescreen, as well as solo releases on vocals, guitar, and harp guitar. Tommy was also instrumental, pun very much intended, in the running of RSL from 2014 to 2022, including performing tracks for their acoustic syllabus launch in 2019. In addition, he completed a degree in music performance and professional practice at Coventry University and continued on there as a lecturer and guitar tutor. He received a triple scholarship as well as the Julian Hellaby Award for Excellence, and also had the opportunity to interact with the heavy metal icon during his tenure there. Mr. Tony Iommi was a visiting professor during this time. And if you don't know who Tony Iommi is, you need to go Google that shit right now. True to form, Tommy has never slowed down. These days, he is constantly composing, gigging, pitching music for sync licensing, being a demo artist for Loudon Guitars and Journey Guitars, and working for G7 Capos, which the best capos on the planet, by the way, I might add. Aside from all of this, the thing I love most about Tommy isn't his talent or his work ethic, both of which are undeniable and truly awe-inspiring. My favorite part about Tommy is his warmth, caring, and how utterly sweet of a being he is. I've had the pleasure of not only knowing Tommy over the past few years, but also of creating with him artistically, and I've always walked away from every interaction with a smile, not only because we've made some pretty incredible noise together, but because I've always had the feeling that Tommy is a friend, a brother, and someone who truly cares about the people in his life. It's such a pleasure to have him here today, ladies and gentlemen, Tommy Luce.
Hey,
How are you,
Johnnie.
Tommy?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. Well, shall we roll into it?
Yeah, thank you for that intro. It was really kind of you. Much too kind, but thank you very
Well,
much. Feelings mutual.
thank you, brother. And I mean, I tell you, I meant every word.
Oh, mate, thank you very much. Looking forward to having a chat with you.
That's right. Well, here we go.
Let's
So,
do
my
it.
first question is, how did you decide that you wanted to become a musician?
I mean, I think for me, with my parents both being musicians, there was always music on in the house, being played either on the record player or CD player. My parents both played, performed actively, and they taught as well. So my mum played the bassoon and the piano, and she sang, played for choirs, that kind of thing, and she still does. And my dad, the violin, sings guitar. He plays quite a few different instruments. And so I think for me, it was a case of there was always music around me. So it was just a very natural progression, I suppose. I started tinkering around on the piano when I was maybe 4 or 5. And then I think about 7, I did my first sort of grade 1 piano exam, and I was never very good at the piano because I didn't practice, which is a good way of not getting good at something. And then when I was 12, I was pretty much. I mean, I'm 6 foot, and I wasn't much smaller when I was in my first year at secondary school. So I think they saw me and thought, "Oh, the tuba, that'll do. He's big and looks gullible. Wants to have no mates." So I started playing that, and then I remember finding a plectrum or a pick, depending on what you call it, on the playground at school when I was about 13. And that was the same day that my brother bought an Iron Maiden CD from the bargain bin at the local shop. And I heard that, and I was just kind of hooked. So I think, you know, nearly 10 years before that was when I started tinkering around on the piano. But that was a bit of a light bulb moment then, I think.
Wow. And that's so great that you had, like, growing up, that you had the nurturing right from the get go, that your parents were musicians. I mean, that's a huge asset to any artist coming up, just to have people that really get it.
Oh yeah, they've always been super supportive, and I mean, like over 30 years down the line now, I mean, my mum and dad have both played on my albums. They've
No
both,
kidding.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like my dad played violin on one 5 or 6 years ago. My mum played piano on it. My brother produces all of it for me. He's played on several of them, and we play in a metal band together. We have done for 20, 21, 22 years. So we've always had that family kind of unit, I suppose, if you like, which is really nice. And because I've always had it, I think there's always that danger of not appreciating enough. But I think the older I get, the more I realize how much I do appreciate it and how much good it's done me.
Absolutely. That makes total sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So what was the first experience you remember having with music?
one of the early memories I can remember, I would have been about 7, and I can remember learning. It was around about the time that Earth Song by Michael Jackson came out, and I can remember saying to my mum, "Oh, I really want to learn how to play that." So she wrote the chords out for me, and I could remember playing it in the assembly at school while people walked in. So that would have been, I think that was the first time I ever played properly in front of people. I remember doing a few concerts here and there locally, but that was a moment that sticks in the mind. I can still remember that pretty well now. So that was nearly 30 years ago, and I think it was just that kind of. It wasn't a massive ego stroke thing, but I do remember just sitting there and thinking. Normally, we have some music coming through the speakers, and instead it's me today. And people are actually looking around and listening. And when you get a bit older, there's a lot of talk, isn't there? Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I think it maybe hit me, oh, I'm actually sitting here doing the thing, rather than just talking about it. So that's probably the earliest one I can remember really clearly.
Wow, what a great memory. Great song too, by the way.
Yeah,
Um,
great video. Yeah,
yeah, oh my god, so good. And it's true. There is. I mean, talk is cheap and there's a lot of it. And that's why it's cheap, but
yeah,
to really sit there and be in the moment and realize, wow, I'm actually delivering this thing I've wanted to do. It's special, it really is.
yeah, definitely. I think I look back at it on and appreciate it a lot more now. And I think when I was, 12, 13, doing rehearsals nearly every night after school, mostly on the tuba, and then stuff with the band at the weekends and gigs and stuff, I didn't do very much else in my life. But at the same time, I don't feel like I missed out. I don't really look back and think, oh, I didn't want to do anything else. I wanted to do music, so I did. And I think, it's easy to look back, isn't it, and think, well, I was so busy doing rehearsals and gigs, maybe I didn't do this, this, and this. I was doing what I wanted to do. So, I was probably just wasting time, really, in a lot of ways. So,
Well,
yeah,
and yeah, and that's just it. If you're doing what your purpose is, then there's no such thing as wasted time. And if you have time to sit
yeah,
around and wonder about all the other stuff you're doing, you're missing out. You're probably doing the wrong thing anyway.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
That's so great, man. So, who are the biggest influences on your work and why?
Influence wise, a very early one, and I didn't really realize this at the time, would be Django Reinhardt. Um, so my dad is a big Stefan Grappelli fan, and it was on in the house when I was very young. And it's that kind of music where it's very jing 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 jing, and you don't really know what that is when you're young. I don't think, but you're aware of it being there, and it's kind of this very rhythmic pulsating thing, isn't it? And when I got older, I guess probably the first time I sat down and actively listened to Django would have been when I started getting into Black Sabbath. I guess probably around 14, and I learned that Doctor Tony Iommi, have to make sure I get that right. Um, he was very inspired by Django because he lost the ends of his fingers in a machine at work, and I think he was gonna quit playing, and then he learned that Django had, this issue with his hand through getting burned, that he was still able to play, and I think that made me think, oh, I better check this guy out properly, and I didn't realize I'd been listening to him for for years already. So we did in my final year at uni. This would have been 2012. We did a gypsy jazz style quartet where I had to arrange a bunch of songs, and it was great fun. And my dad played violin on that project, which was really nice. So Django was definitely a huge one. Iron Maiden, definitely. That would have been when I was 13. My uncle was a record dealer at the time, and we used to go and stay with him and my cousins and my aunt for 4 days in the summer. And because of him being a record dealer and sold CDs on eBay and all this, my cousins and him just had everything by everyone.
Yeah,
So we
right.
introduced bands like Aerosmith, The Offspring quite a lot back then. Then getting into Metallica, Pantera, Slayer, bands like that. Definitely around sort of the 2001, 2002 kind of era when we started the band Smokescreen that you mentioned earlier. There, we were covering the likes of System of a Down, Korn, Rage Against the Machine, Metallica, all those kind of bands, and then and I think other influences as well. When YouTube first started, I think it was around 2006. I can remember finding Andy McKee on there, and that blew a whole new world open for me. I didn't realize you could play fingerstyle type stuff, and that's when I saw a harp guitar for the first time. So probably the biggest three: Django Reinhardt with Grappelli as well, and then Iron Maiden, and then before all of that as well, I used to listen to a lot of. We used to watch Top of the Pops,
Hmm.
and I can remember artists on there. So you'd have a lot of, I suppose, a lot of one-hit wonders, but also, there are a lot of artists. So there's an artist called Gina G, who very, very cheesy pop stuff. She was absolutely huge. Um, there was a band called Eiffel 65 who did an absolutely huge song back in what would have been the late 90s, and that's recently been resampled. I think it's maybe David Guetta that's redone it. I can't remember,
Uh,
but yeah, that that one, and
yeah. I know what
that
song you're
was
talking.
yeah, that was huge back then. So a lot of the kind of chart pop stuff, and that trailed off when I got into Maiden and the metal and the rock stuff. So yeah, I suppose those are the key areas really. And I think doing the job that I do now with G7th, I get exposed to so much new music on a daily basis. I can't help but listen to loads and loads of new stuff. And every now and then something really stands out, and you think, oh, why have I never listened to this person before? But that's nice. I think, and then of course you think, right, I'll go back and listen. And my cousin sent me a tape when I was about 15 of all these power metal bands as well, like bands like Blind Guardian, Dragon Force, maybe that was a bit later, but Blind Guardian and Rhapsody and Symphony X, all those guys. And I
Mhm.
got really into that. Dream Theater as well. And yeah, I think you get to a point, don't you, where you think I really should learn how to play guitar like John Petrucci, or at least try to anyway. So I think it's on everyone's radar at some point who plays electric guitar, isn't it?
Yeah, at least to gain an understanding of it. And I just wanted to point out too, man, I love the breadth of what your interest is and what you actually are able to play well. Because I mean, I've heard you do. I mean, obviously we did the metal track together, and your solo was insane
Yeah.
on that. So you definitely
Yeah.
have that Petrucci-esque kind of thing going. But then I've also heard your acoustic stuff where you play gorgeous acoustics, like, and your voice too, by the way, is really, really incredible. But it's like you really are, you cover the spectrum, and that's not easy. That's rare to come by, I for me anyway, I don't see that often. So your influences really do come out in just the breadth of what you do. It's pretty awesome.
I appreciate that. And I know when we did your track, when we did Carousel there, it was really good fun. It was an interesting time because I can remember doing that track with you. And then I can remember doing some soundbite clips for Emerald with the harp guitars
Yeah.
with those guys back there on the back wall.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then I can remember doing my brother and I are working on a gypsy jazz submission album, like a pastiche album. And we're about 2/3 done with that. And then the week after that, I did a death metal project for a band called Moose Cult over in New Zealand, which was really good fun. And I mean, when he asked me about it, he said, it's death metal. And I thought, well, I like Decapitated. I like a lot of these bands, but I like Nile, but I wouldn't ever call myself particularly knowledgeable on it. I'm not as knowledgeable on death metal necessarily. And I had a chat with him about it, and I said, "Yeah, I don't know if I'm maybe the right person." And he said, "Well, metal's metal, isn't it? Really, just do your thing, and we'll see what happens." So I did, and I listened back, and I thought, "Yeah, he's right. Actually, it all falls under the same tree. Maybe some of the techniques are a bit different. Maybe there's more trem picking or whammy bar or sweep picking or something in some of these subgenres, but who cares past a certain point? It's just metal, isn't it? Just good fun.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm glad you brought that up because I really do miss the good old days when there were the basic food groups and there were no sub genres and then sub genres. I'm just like, bro, like you said, metal's metal, rock is rock. Let's keep it
Yeah.
simple. Yeah,
Tricky, isn't it, after a certain point? Because you just think, when people want to put themselves into a really tiny box. I can remember doing a gig maybe back in probably 15 years ago, and I can remember getting a flyer given to me at the gig. And it said, I don't remember the band's name now, but it was, oh, we're underground, black, death, speed, thrash, something core. And I thought, I kind of already don't want to listen to that, but because you've tried so hard to try and make yourselves out to be different, and I know you're going to sound like everything that I've heard anyway, so just tell me you're a metal band. It's fine. I'll just listen to it and make my own mind up. But I suppose at the same time, it's hard because we've all got to try and stand out in our own way. But at the same time, if you try too hard, then maybe it takes away from what you should really be doing. You know?
yeah, no, totally. Well, and honestly, I feel like I've noticed the more corporate music has gotten over the years, the more subgenres have become a thing too. I kind of feel like those things are related somehow, though I
Yeah.
can't really say how exactly. But back in the '60s, if you tried to like convolute like what rock was, like the Doors, you could say were like jazz infused rock or something. It's like I feel like they would just be like, "No, we're a rock
Yeah.
band."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. So, what's the weirdest thing that's ever inspired you?
The weirdest thing. Ooh. What, musical or non-musical or just anything at all? Or
Whatever answers the question for you, my man. It's your interview.
wow, the weirdest thing that's ever inspired me. That's a really good one, actually. Um, got a bit of a think about that. I was kind of, I know when we initially talked about doing this interview, we kind of talked a little bit about, obviously, whenever you're talking about inspiration and things like that. Um, I can remember going all the way back to this would have been quite an early festival, probably one of the first ones that I went to, and I think the first one that I went to was Download 2004, somewhere like that. So I would have been 17. And one thing that I do remember, I don't remember what I necessarily wrote because of this or anything, but I do remember feeling just a bit in awe when this happened. I can remember watching, I think it was Soulfly on the main stage, and I can remember turning around just to see how big the audience was because I'd never been to anything that big before, really outside. It was the first big festival I'd been to, and I can remember, just looking back, and I think at that point, Download was maybe 80,000 people, somewhere around there. And when you've never been to a festival like that, that's maybe a local beer festival with a few thousand people, but 80,000 is a lot. And I can remember watching it raining, and it was raining up until kind of here, and then it wasn't raining there. And I just remember looking at it and thinking, I suppose there has to be a point where rain starts and stops. And it just never occurred to me. So I remember looking at it and just thinking, that's really weird, but that's kind of cool. And yeah, I've always remembered that. And that was nearly 20 years ago now. So that's definitely stuck. And I do remember coming home and thinking, I don't know why or how that's inspired me, but it's just a really natural thing. You can't cause it necessarily. And yeah, I just remember looking around and thinking, oh, that's really odd. That's really interesting. I'll remember that. And so yeah, I suppose I maybe mentally banked it and used it in some way. But yeah, I definitely remember that being a thing and just being really surprised by it and thinking, I'm not sure if that's cool or weird or all of the above, but it's definitely something. I've remembered it for this long, haven't I? So it's clearly done something. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
and that's
probably
a
go with
really
that.
interesting. Yeah, that's a real. I can see there being a song in there, like even the rain has to end or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe maybe I'll actually try and do something properly with it one day. But yeah, it was a bizarre thing. Maybe not the first thought you'd have going to a metal festival. You think, right, let's go and look at some rain, but it was there. The beers ran out. Let's look at the rain, lads. But
Well,
yeah, so there you go. Something to do, and it kill some time
that's
before the grave. So
that's awesome. So, how has your art influenced other people?
um, I know. So my brother is the singer and the other guitar player in the band in Smokescreen, and he has produced us for quite a long time now. And I do remember they're probably about 5 or 8 years younger than we are. There were quite a few metal bands around the area. I'm going back maybe 15 years ago now, and I can definitely remember 3 or 4 bands all coming in, and they would ask Sam and I about, so how did you write this and how did you do this? And I can remember listening to them as they were recording stuff, thinking that sounds quite a bit like this riff from this song and this bit from this. And we all kind of borrow things and get inspired by each other. So it's not like it was a, it wasn't a problem. It wasn't a lawsuit,
Yeah,
but it was quite nice actually, sort of listening to it and thinking. I can remember teaching some of the guitar players down the line as well, and like giving them pointers on technique when they wanted it, and learning how to write riffs and then trying to, I suppose, essentially be inspired by stuff and not just replicate it. So I do remember feeling a very kind of distinct warmth from that, I suppose, thinking, oh, they like it enough to actually try and, incorporate some of it maybe. But every now and then, I'll get people write in and maybe Instagram or Facebook and things like that. And not loads and loads, but it's nice when people do. And, sometimes they'll send a song in and say, oh, I heard this song, or maybe even if it's just a cover of something that I've done. And and they'll send over a recording of something that they've done and say, "Oh, I heard this or I saw this bit of artwork." And I have my character, my little cartoon guy, Beardface, who's just me but cartoony, and and I like that because first of all, I don't have to be in anything, and I don't mean that in a lazy, can't be bothered way, but there's only so much you can do with this. I know what I look like. We're not going to sell much based on this. And not that it's about selling stuff, but I like the idea of having a little cartoon character because then he can be doing stuff, even if I haven't got any new music necessarily. We do things for certain events. So like, there's always a Christmas bit of artwork, an Easter bit. I was talking to my artwork guy this morning about an Easter idea, um, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's nice. I can get creative with that. And I'd say I was talking to Alistair from Loudon a little while ago. I bumped into him at the Birmingham show, and he always says the same thing whenever he sees me. I like your music, but I always like the artwork as well. And really, I know what he's saying is yeah, the music's fine, but the artwork's really cool. What are you going to do with the artwork next? And I think, well, yeah, it's nice that people are looking at it, and it's funny, really, because that's kind of what I want to achieve with it. It makes it stand out a bit more. It's cartoonish, it's silly, and it's fun trying to come up with ideas. Like, the guy that does all the artwork for me, he does all the artwork for Smokescreen as well. I've known him for 20 odd years. And yeah, it's just nice digging around inside of his head and seeing what he can come up with for me. So yeah, I get people mention the artwork as well and say, "Oh, it inspired me to do this." And I've had one or two people draw their own things that look a little bit like Beardface and send it in. The nearest I'll get to fan art, I suppose, which is really sweet. So yeah, it's good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. It's fun.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen Beardface. Beardface is awesome. That was a really really cool caricature. Cool way of promoting yourself.
Well, it's like I think the first time he did it for me, he said, "I've just drawn this. What do you reckon?" And I looked at it and I thought, well, if it didn't look so much like me, I'd be a bit offended, but it does. Let's use it. Just Fred Flintstone with a beard. And I have it on the. I think I've got one here, as if by magic. I keep one of these in my wallet. I've got him on a little. I don't know where you can pick that up.
Oh,
And if you can
that's
read it up.
cool.
Yeah. So this will make you a better guitarist, probably. So there you go. So just a little fun thing. It's like a business card, I suppose. Really, I give them away with albums and stuff like that. I never actually use them as picks just because where's the design off. But yeah, it's a branding thing though, isn't it? And it's cool. Can always find something new for him to do.
Definitely, that's brilliant. So, do you have any pre-show or pre-studio rituals?
So pre-show wise, I always like to make sure I drink a lot of water. Because I sweat an awful lot. I'm always concentrating a lot when I'm playing. And however much practice I've done, I always think I haven't done enough. So there's probably always that initial kind of, and when I hear the first, I kind of gauge it by the end of the first song. If people clap a little bit, I think, oh, maybe it's going all right. So I like to drink plenty. I'll always do a few, like massage my forearms and all this kind of thing, and yeah, do the regular warm ups. I'll do some scale it bits. I quite often, so I'll watch stuff that's nothing to do whatsoever with what I'm doing. There's a show on YouTube. I got into it. My girlfriend introduced me to it maybe 6 months ago, and it's really really zany. I don't know if you have it over in your part of the world, but it's called "Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared."
Never heard of it.
You should check it out. It's a really, really strange show, and it all centers around these three characters. One of them is a duck, one of them is a kind of Muppet looking character, and another one is a guy in a red suit with sort of a ball of wool for a head and big googly eyes. And because it's nothing to do with music or anything, although there are some fun songs in it, I like watching it because it makes me laugh. And it's really, really creative. And it's the kind of thing that I look at and just think, I got no idea how they came up with that. And I like going on stage with that kind of mindset, or I like going into a recording session with that mindset because I think I really like this. It's really short, it's beautifully quirky, and it's really odd. And I've got no idea how they came up with it, but I'm really inspired by it. So I watch a couple of shorts. They're only maybe 5 minutes long, 3 or 5 minutes long. And so I watch one of them and then I put it down and then I go and do whatever I do. And that's what I'm on at the minute. I'm watching a lot of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. But other things, there's a Rob Zombie cartoon film called The Haunted World of El Super Beasto. And I'll watch clips from that sometimes. Like I'll watch a couple of the songs on YouTube or Spotify or wherever before I record. Because again, that's quirky, it's weird, it's zany. So yeah, I think I just like to stick myself in a good mood, something that I know I like, something that I'm really inspired by and that I think is really creative. And then I'll do some press ups, I'll do some crunches, all that kind of thing, just to get myself somewhat nimble. No marathons or anything like that. But yeah, if it's a gig where I'm doing lots of singing, more so with my own stuff, then I won't have anything dairy wise, I won't have chocolate or milk or anything like that. I'll have some vocal zone, like some tea or some of the little sweets that you get, or weak squash, stuff like that. So yeah, fairly standard stuff, I suppose. But I do like watching something a bit weird and freaky before I go on because it makes me laugh. Or I'll watch 5 minutes of stand up of a comedian I really like just to put myself in a good mood.
That's really smart. And I know I've talked to people too, where it's like, especially if, like, I don't know about you, but like, there have been times where I'll have something happen before I'm going to do a show. Like, I'll get in an argument with somebody, and then it's like I'm just out of the game. I'm out of the headspace, and stuff like that it's really smart to put yourself back in the game and just kind of get it. Because I mean, when you're up on stage, you should be light and creative and having fun. It shouldn't be serious. And so that's really smart. That's actually really smart.
It works for me. Yeah, I think every now and then I've had a few things like that, and I did a gig quite recently. It was the first theatre gig I'd done in like 3 or 4 years, and something happened literally 20 minutes before, and it was something quite major.
Yeah,
And I can remember getting the phone call and just thinking, if I don't answer this, I'll be wondering what's happening, and if I do, well, at least I'll know, and it won't be ideal. So I answered it, and I think it was one of those things. I thought I can either let myself be really affected by it, or I can just think, well, now I've prepared for this. I know what I'm doing. I'll watch some Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, which is what I did, and just went on, and it went really well. And I think because of that, it's a bit hippie-ish maybe, or whatever you want to say it is, but I think I don't know how many gigs I've done over the years, hundreds and hundreds now, and I'm very fortunate to say I've had the chance to. But I think it's just, if you've been doing it for quite a long time, and you think, I've had things happen before, I've had injuries, I've had all sorts of stuff, and I've played through most of them. Um, so yeah, you find a way of making it work, don't you? And you think, we're here to do a job, and we'll get it done. And it might not be perfect, but it probably won't be perfect anyway. So you get it done.
that's right. No, and that's true. And there is almost, I mean, it's a sense of duty too, because you are there to entertain a crowd. You are there to do a job, 100%. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah, I
that's a
agree.
really great attitude.
Yeah, yeah, it's all good fun. I like hearing other people's things as well. Do you have any at all? Like any rituals that you tend to partake in, Johnny? Or
Oh boy. I mean, nothing too extensive. I mean, the main things, I'm usually singing, so I always do vocal warm-ups. I'll usually play through like some scales on the guitar a little bit to warm my hands up. The other thing that I do that is really useful is if I can, I'll walk around the place I'm going to be performing and I'll just like touch things in the space, like I'll touch chairs and walls, and it just contact it gets me in contact with the space a little bit, which somehow just helps. It helps nerves, but it also helps for me to kind of like somehow project myself better when I'm on stage because I'm kind of in contact with the room.
that's good.
Um,
Yeah,
Other than that, I mean, water, and I try to eat a bit before the show. So I'm not, if I eat right before the show, then I'll be burping through the show, which is no good when you're singing. And that is very real. That
yeah.
happens. Yeah. And then on that, I try to just kind of be chill, have quiet time. I'm pretty to myself, you know, um, before a show, for me.
That's interesting to learn. I think it's another thing that I find. I started doing this a few years ago, and it's only sort of just clicked back in because I've been getting back into sort of more regular gigs over the last while. And something that I do like to do, it's a bit of a safety net, I suppose, but I do find that it works. Um, I'll turn it back on here and I'll show you. So what I tend to do is I'll always have my written set list, and I'll do it in different colors of pen depending on what colors the lights are. Because if you don't know, it's gonna suddenly go blue or red or something, you can't see a bunch of it. So I'll usually do that in a few different colors. But then what I'll also do is I'll stick a note on my phone with the set list as well, just for emergencies in case anything really comes off the rails. And something else
Mhm.
that I like to do is I'll have a picture on my phone background of something that I really like or something that makes me happy. I've got a few on there. I've got some of me and my teenager on there, but one that I've got at the moment that I've had for a few gigs now, and this is a little bit of a cool name drop, I admit. But we got to see and meet Weird Al Yankovic
I saw that
last
picture
month
on
when he came to
Facebook.
London, and so
Yeah,
I'll stick that on my music stand.
that's so awesome.
Cool. Yeah, that's another thing
Yeah.
that I like to do anyway. It's just, and not if it's necessarily going badly. I wouldn't ever say it goes too badly, but I think it's just a nice thing. Every now and then I'll just tap it and think, oh yeah, that was really good.
Yeah.
Just to kind of to keep me going. I suppose some nights you need that more than other, but uh, but yeah, it's another little mind game that you can play. I suppose you have to just find what works for you, don't you?
Yeah, 100% you do. Everyone's gonna be different on that, but that's the point, is to make it a point to find something that works for you. So I think I mean, those are all, you've been one of the more, expansive people I've had on as far as, like, what you do. So that's pretty cool. I think you just gave people a lot of ideas of things to try, which is really awesome.
Oh, I appreciate it. I mean, I think the thing is something I know very well about myself, and I'm doing it now. I'm not much of a I'm not much of a man of few words with things like this. I like talking about stuff. Small talk's fine, but when it's kind of when you'll hit me with a question, all right, so something that's inspired you. I don't think that's a 10-word answer, really. I think there's a bit, maybe it is to some people, not to me, though. I won't shut up for a bit. So thanks for letting me ramble on. And it's nice. it's nice to just sort of have this very open dialogue with it. And yeah, it's nice to expand on these things.
Agreed, it is, and it's fun to get your viewpoints on them too. So I'm a big fan of expounding on things myself. So I'm really happy that you're able to roll with it and that this is fun for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So what risks, if any, have you personally taken for the sake of your music?
Well, um, so when I left, when would this have been? So I left school when I was 18, and I did. So we do AS levels and A levels here. It's kind of the you can do college, but it's what you would do in your college years. I think over in your part of the world, what we call university tends to be what you guys call college, doesn't it?
I
Um,
believe so.
I think. I mean, it doesn't matter too much, I know, but I think that's what it is anyway. So when I left school, I was already doing some gigs and guitar lessons, and I just thought, well, I don't want to go to uni at the moment. I don't feel like that's something I want to do. So I just went and got the first job there was. So I was doing guitar lessons and gigs and lessons, kind of sparingly, I suppose, and just gradually building it up. And then I went and got a job working at a local supermarket in the bakery. Not because I particularly wanted to, but it was a job, and I thought, well, it's something, you know. And so I started doing that, and then probably about a year into that, I can remember I'd spent ages trying to get a contract that because they're big on 0 hours contracts, and so when you're on holiday, you don't get paid for it and all this stuff. And about a week after I started the job, one of the guys I worked with said, "Oh, I'm off to work at the local music shop. He needs someone there." And I just didn't know that. And normally I'm in the music shop all the time, and so I just didn't know about this job. And I thought, "Oh, I could have gone and worked there." So after a year, and I finally got this contract, we got a new boss, and they just scrapped everyone's contracts again. And I just remember thinking, right, can't do this anymore. This is really doing me in. And I had a chat with my friend who'd gone and gotten this job at the music shop, and he said, "Look, I'm about to leave within the next 3 to 4 months. Let's have a chat about it." So I spoke to my mum, and I just said, "Look, I can't do this job anymore. I can't make the hours work, but there will be a job working here at the music shop." And so I spoke to her, and I agreed that I'd give it, 4 months or 6 months, whatever it was. She lent me a little bit of money, and within about 6 to 7 months, I think it was, I carried on working and teaching and gigging, and I managed to get the job lined up there. But there was always the chance that it wouldn't work out. So that was a bit of a risk. It was a calculated one, and I had a safety net there, and I'd saved up some money beforehand. Um, and then after 4 years working at the, well, no, 3 years working at the music shop, my girlfriend at the time went to uni, and she was kind of the last person back home to go to uni. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go then. And so I applied, and then as it happens, we broke up. And I thought, well, I'll go anyway, just to see what it's like. So I kind of left everything behind in that sense, and I was 22 at the time, so I was a bit older, and I carried on doing some guitar lessons as well. So I still had a bit of a business going. And then when I left, I came back home and I did the RSL application, and then I started working. I suppose the safe thing in inverted commas would have been to go and get a regular job, again in inverted commas. But I thought, well, no, I'll try my hand at this. And I was doing exams, I was doing lectures at uni, I was doing lessons, I was doing gigs, all these different things. So feels like there's been kind of a lot of risks sewn into it as I've gone along. And bizarrely, when I was over doing NAMM, I think it was back in, would it have been 2019 NAMM? That was when I met the G7th guys. And so it's kind of a bit of a risk, going over and just kind of thinking, oh, these guys that I've met within maybe 3 months after that, I just thought, yeah, I'll stop doing nearly all the other stuff, and I'll put all my eggs in that basket for the most part, because they seem like great people. They're a great company, and I knew of them certainly already. But I think sometimes these things just come along and smack you in the face, and you think, well, all right, if it doesn't work out, I'll find another thing. I'll do some of the other things that I used to do. And of course, then we had the pandemic. So it's a good job, really, that I put most of my eggs in the G7th basket, because I lost all the other stuff anyway, or most of it. So I suppose it's all been risky in its own way. Not risky as in I've gone to Vegas and put all my life savings on black 13 and a half or whatever. But yeah, I don't really think about it that much. But when you ask me about it, and I sort of trace it back, and I think, yeah, I can see why that was maybe a bit risky, but I made it as risk free as I could. But at the same time, I suppose, sometimes not taking a risk is the risky thing, isn't it? If you just stay doing the same thing all the time, then nothing's going to change. And I think, I like thinking of it as evolving rather than changing. That's again a bit kind of hippie-ish, Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love hippies, but yeah, I think that's how I've kind of managed to tweak my mindset over the years. I never used to like the idea of change. I thought it was kind of it suggested something was bad. Um, and sometimes it is, but I think, yeah, I think of it very much as right. I need to do a bit more of this or a bit less of this, or the same amount of this, but in a different way. So I think you kind of get better at knowing how risky something is, possibly, before you do it.
Definitely, definitely, and I love what you said about how sometimes the risk is not taking a risk. I mean, that's a real
Mm.
I mean, number 1, that's like a song. That's gotta be a song, but also too, you're so correct, and I mean, I think there's, like you said, it's a lot of people have this viewpoint that change is bad, but and yes, some change can be bad. Obviously, like wars and earthquakes and things like that suck. But if it's a change where it's a function of your own illusion and you're causing the change, there's a difference between that and stuff that happens to you. I mean, that's how growth happens. That's how you get better. That's how life gets better. So I love everything you just said. That was that I got helped just now by hearing you say that stuff. You know?
Oh, I appreciate that. That's if I've got time to tell you this thing, I will. Um, on the subject of that, I know when I was in during lockdown, something very, very big changed in my life. And yeah, I won't go into loads of detail on it because it's somewhat personal. And but suffice to say, it was something that really altered my mindset. And I didn't like how much it altered it, and I didn't like how helpful it was because it made me think, why have I not been doing this my whole life? And it was one of those things. I've always been a planner. I've always thought, right, well, I better plan my funeral, hadn't I? Because I'm 23 now, and it's probably going to be tomorrow. Not literally, but I think I've always thought the more I worry about something, the more I plan it, the better it will be. And maybe to an extent, but at the same time, we all know someone who's eaten really healthily and exercised every day of their life, and they get hit by a bus at 30 because life's horrible. Sometimes, it's what happens. And I've never really seen the whole be present, stay in the moment thing. I think maybe through being self-employed and freelance a lot of the time, a lot of my working life, you're always thinking, right, where's the next bit of work coming from?
Sure.
And I think maybe that, part of my psyche has always lived there. And this situation really forced me to just think, right, we'll go an hour at a time, never mind a day at a time. And as I started doing that more and more, I felt myself realizing the benefit of it. And it made me quite angry at first because I thought I had this stuff sorted. I thought I knew how to do this, but it was a situation that was out of my hands, and it did me an awful lot of good in that sense. And I think now, um, essentially, it was the breakup of a relationship, and of course, when that happens, it's the end of everything. Um, but it really kind of made me realize how much I needed to change my way of thinking with certain things. And then a year or so ago, I'm in a different relationship now, and these things that I learned going through that horrible stuff has held me in very good stead for where I'm at now. It's made me a much better person to be in a relationship with. I like to think, I look back now and think, oh, I must have been a bit of a nightmare with this, not deliberately. And my partner now, she's really, really good at that. She's extremely grounded, and she's much better at doing it than I am, and I learn a lot from her. And I think, well, I'm a bit closer than I would have been if I hadn't gone through that thing. So I can see the benefit, and it's definitely made me a lot more. No, I'm at a gig now. I'm going to stick the phone down. I'll do Instagram later. Instagram will still be there, and so it's made me think. Well, I'll still plan things, but I won't worry about it quite as much. I'll cut myself a bit more slack with it because whatever I plan, life happens, doesn't it? Things change, and life's happening outside right now. An aeroplane or something or other is happening. But yeah, so that's something that happened to me as well. And I think it really, really challenged every part of me in terms of how I thought about and dealt with stuff. But looking back now, after being a year down the line with my girlfriend now, I realize not just because of things with her, like the way that I operate on a daily basis, I'm a better dad because of it.
Yeah.
I'm better at my job because of it, and it's made me realize how much better I needed to get. I just didn't realize it. I needed something extreme to come along, and it did, and it was hard for a while. But now I see the benefits. So well, it's when you least expect it. Hippie-ish though it sounds, I'm wearing that out now, aren't I? Need to think of another way of saying that same thing.
No, but it's all good. Then and it all makes total sense. So, Tommy, what's one thing about you that would shock everyone to know?
Shock everyone. Let's have a think. I'm guessing we've got to keep this fairly clean, haven't we? Um, I'm just trying to think. So,
I mean, it's pre-recorded. I can edit stuff out if I need to.
no, it's fine. Actually, there's one thing that's kind of cool. It didn't feel cool at the time. Actually, when I was an examiner, I got to fail. Got to, as I didn't enjoy doing this. I didn't know I'd done it. So I was in, I think it was Madrid, somewhere in Spain, and I inadvertently failed the Spanish Prime Minister's son
Oh,
on
jeez.
his guitar exam. I won't say what year it was, but I don't know. I don't even know what his name was because I didn't recognize the name. And of course, everyone was sort of very hush hush around this particular kid. And I don't think his dad was there on the day. And afterwards, it was just, you don't know who that was, do you? And you think, no, of course I don't. It's just another kid, all the same to me, you know. So I got to fail the Spanish Prime Minister's son. That was fun. Other things. I'm a grade 8 tuba player with high honours. They probably wouldn't think that necessarily to look at me. What else? Try to think of something really, really completely different. I'm just looking around the room. Oh, I can think of a thing, but I've got to leave the room to get it. Can I go and get it?
Sure.
I'll only be a minute.
Okay.
So this probably isn't a massively shocking thing or anything, but something I really love. Uh, retro toys. Big,
Ah.
big fan of these guys. So these are called Monster in My Pocket. And when I was about 7, I can remember going to the dentist and having a tooth out with gas and air, and it was awful. And I used to get these toys, me and my brother did. And I can remember my dad afterwards saying, I know that wasn't a lot of fun. Let's go to the toy shop. And he got me this kind of pyramid thing with about 12 of those guys in there. So I collected them for years, don't know where they went, probably car boot sailed them or gave them to a thrift store. And then, when was this? Maybe a month ago, there's a shop down the road from me called Strange Apparitions. And it's sort of a comic book store and a record store within a garden centre. And my girlfriend tagged me in this video, or it might have just been a picture actually. And it had dozens of these on there. And I thought, right, that's where I'm going then. So I drove down there, rang the guy that owns it on the way, and I said, right, save me some of them. And I think I bought about 30 of them in one go. Spent about 90 quid on these little toys. But I love them, you know, and I think I've got a nephew who's 3 and a nephew who's 12. So, you know, with the 12-year-old, you know, things like watching the Turtles, watching old cartoons, stuff like that. I'm mad into all of that, really like that, you know, Hey Arnold, the Turtles, Sharky and George, you know, Street Sharks, Street Fighter, old games as well, you know, Mortal Kombat and Monkey Island, Explore, all that kind of stuff. Mighty Max, you know, all of that kind of stuff, Biker Mice from Mars. So yeah, definitely my kid's side. I don't hide that in the slightest, you know, but I suppose it's maybe little retro toys aren't the first thing when you look at me necessarily. But I love it, you know. So there's probably lots of other things as well, but that seems like a reasonable contrast, you know.
That's awesome. And then what is the one thing or the one tool that you cannot live without as an artist and why?
One thing I can't live without. Well, I really should mention this, shouldn't I? So it'd have to be one of these, Johnny.
I believe you. I'm with you.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, it's one of those things. Since starting to work for G7th, I used to work in retail, 2007 to 2009 or so, and it was one of those things. I've been playing guitar by about 7 years by that point, and I didn't know anything really about string gauge. I didn't know anything about action or setups. I just played stuff. Had no idea. And when I worked there, I got to experience why all these things were important. And obviously, back then, we used to sell the original G7 capos, and I could feel that I could see and feel that they operated very differently, and you know, they were a very different design. They operated totally differently. They felt super reliable and incredibly hard to break. And I think when I started to work for them, I realized how seriously people take tiny parts of their rig. And I thought I took it seriously, but not compared to a lot of these guys. And I think the nice thing now is with something like Capo, obviously, yeah, I work for the company. But it's also a really nice reminder of what the job's afforded me. You know, I've gotten to meet some great people such as yourself, you know, who I class as my good friends now in all different parts of the world. And obviously, I use it for what it's for in terms of capoing. But funnily enough, a friend of mine. His name's Tom Clues, and he's a tech for lots of different bands. He techs for Rick Astley. He techs for Nick Kershaw. He's done Emily Sandy, Stormzy, a real range of stuff, and he's a lovely guy. And he texts for a chap called Adam. And every now and then, Tom sends me a picture of something that they've done in a hotel room with a capo, and their heating broke. So they got a couple of these capos, and they pushed the buttons down on hair dryers and then just angled them into the room so it was heating the room up. So
Oh
that's
wow.
what I do now. Because every now and then you go to a hotel and the heating's not working. So that's what I do. So this is my get out of jail free card to stay warm in a hotel room. So that's quite useful. You know, if you've got a bag of chips or a bag of popcorn or something, put it around the top of it, keeps it sealed up. And I think, yeah, it's one of those things where if I'm walking around and I'm feeling a bit tired, I'm doing whatever I'm doing. When I used to do the long exam tours for 6, 7 weeks, you know, I'd always keep one of these with me anyway, and I'd look at it or I'd feel it in my pocket, and it would just remind me, well, I've got this family, I've got this, I've got the work that I do with these guys, and that inspires me. And I'm not an engineer in the slightest, but when I talk to Nick, who invented all the G7th capos, and he tells me why he's done things in a certain way, I don't have the kind of mind that can see things if they're not there. You know, if you say to me, right, here's an empty room, we're going to do this, this, and this, it won't mean a lot to me. But when we actually put things in there and start moving them around, I can visualize it. You know, my teenager can do it really well. My girlfriend can do it really well. I don't have that ability at all. I can hear stuff, but I can't see stuff. And so that fills in some gaps for me. So for a lot of reasons, yeah, this is a Swiss Army knife of life, I suppose now. But failing that, um, something that I take everywhere that's really essential for me. Don't know if you can see this too well. You see the little orca with a pair of headphones on there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an Australian writer called David Thorne that I really like, and that's from one of the covers of his books. He's done about 10 now, and I always keep one in my work bag. I keep one in my travel bag. I keep one in my car, one in my suitcase. So I've always got one of his books with me wherever I am in the world. And essentially, years back, he came up with this. So it was a piece that did the rounds. It went all over David Letterman, all over Ellen, and it went all over the UK. And you know, have I got news for you? The papers, stuff like that. And essentially, he's a guy that takes the Mickey out of people if they're asking unreasonable things. He does email back and forth with people to wind them up. And I think he went for a chiropractic assessment, and they tried to charge him hundreds of dollars for something that did nothing. So he drew a picture of a spider with 7 legs, which I've got tattooed on my leg. And they tried to charge him, $311. So he sent him a picture of this spider and said, well, I value this at $311. There you go, have that. And sent it over an email. And I got really hooked on that silly sense of humor. So I get a new book of his every year. He releases it just before Christmas. And I love them because I've killed many an hour in airports. I read it before I go on stage sometimes. I'll read it if I'm in a hotel or if I'm in a car park waiting for something or if I'm on a ferry, whatever it might be, and I'll have a different one and I'll rotate it all the time. And I really like that because there's some elements of really smart writing in there and some really interesting stuff mixed with real silliness as well. So I always keep one of those with me, whatever I'm doing. And yeah, but that's another essential thing actually. That's really important. If I don't have one with me, I feel a bit sort of naked, I suppose, because I've done it for so many years now. So yeah, David Thorne, everyone should go and check him out, definitely.
Hell yeah, I love that, and I love that you have something like that where because you ask people that question, it's usually like their guitar, their voice, their something that pertains directly to the instrument, and that's cool because mindset is a big part of it too, and keeping yourself light and loose is really important. So, no
Yeah,
pun intended, your last name is Loose. I just realized. So that's you
yeah,
have
yeah.
tools to keep yourself loose for a session, don't or for a performance, don't you?
I have little choice in the matter. Yeah, people always think that I've made up my name. You think, but no, if I could have chosen that surname, I would have probably chosen something different if I wanted it to sound rock star and cool or something. But people quite often say, is that really your name? Yeah, I don't hear it. I don't look at loose and think, oh well, but I guess they think, fast and loose or whatever. And I just think, well, it's just a name I've had since I was born, so I don't think anything of it really. But I'm proud of my name. I don't think it's silly or anything, but it's not probably the first thing I would have chosen if I was trying to sound rock starry, which people often tell me they think it is, which I find a bit odd. But then again, I suppose you've got Zach Wild, haven't you?
That's
Wild,
true.
I don't know, Casey Chaos. So yeah, whatever people want to make it, I suppose.
Right on. So, what has been the most difficult piece of music for you to create and why?
Difficult piece of music. Hmm. I know. So some years ago, a friend of mine lost somebody very close to her, and it was one of those situations where it's still a mystery. Essentially, someone took their own life, and no one knows why they did it. I never met him, but I've been friends with her for decades, and I just remember the fallout and how everything, how everything felt for her from an outsider's point of view. And obviously, it wasn't someone that I knew, but I suppose seeing someone that I cared about that much, as upset as they were, I uh, I had a few other things that happened in my own life around that time, and I ended up sort of putting 4 or 5 of them all on one album. And that song wasn't even about me. It was about this my friend's partner, who I didn't even know or meet. But I think it was one of these very reflective things where she couldn't save him, and no one could save him, and I couldn't save her in that sense. She didn't need me to save her, but it was one of those things I couldn't fix it for her, and she couldn't fix things with him. And I think when I was writing that, it made me realize that part of the over planning thing, and constantly trying to overhelp, I'm definitely guilty of that, wanting to sort of try and fix things. Maybe it's partly being a man, I don't know. Maybe being a dad as well. You're always kind of thinking you don't want your children to experience any upset or pain, but at the same time, they will do with certain things. So you can't wrap them in cotton wool. And so that song was harder than I realized. I think there have been a few um, of that kind of nature, but yeah, I would say the EP that I did back in 2016, it was called "Carrying the Unfixable," and that song went on there. And it was actually about a friend of mine. Not to to bring it down. Hopefully, I can put a positive spin on it. He very tragically took his own life, and for various reasons, I felt that I could have helped him not do that. And I found myself searching around for an answer, I suppose, really, to try and help myself understand why I was feeling that way. And I stumbled on this blog post. I don't remember where I saw it or the full context of it, but I just remember a couple of lines of text, and it just said, "Some things you can't fix, some things you just have to carry." And that's why I called it "Carrying the Unfixable." And I just read that, and it was one of those moments where I really needed and wanted to find something that just spoke to me desperately, and I stumbled across it. And I thought, well, I'll immortalize that then. I'll call the album that. And all the songs on there are to do with things of that nature, like not just sitting writing morbid songs about things, but trying to, I suppose, talk about what I learned from it and put a positive spin on a horrible situation. So all of that was pretty tough, but probably the catalyst of that was writing this song about my friend's boyfriend years ago.
Wow. Yeah, that's I can't even imagine. And that's yeah, that's an incredibly difficult thing to confront and deal with the subject matter of. But I mean, I love what you said though, carrying the unfixable. That's a really great viewpoint of like sometimes you just have to shoulder that stuff. That's life, you know?
Yeah, totally. I think it's one of those things, isn't it, where I felt very guilty for a long time. I thought if I don't think about it all day, that's me showing that I don't care. And of course, it's not because how many? I mean, I'm 36 now. I've experienced a lot of things. It's like with guitar, isn't it? Do you play every song that you've learned on guitar every day? You can't, can you?
No,
You
of
know.
course not.
No, I remember reading an interview with Mick Thompson some years ago from Slipknot saying that he estimates he's learned about 2,000 songs all the way through. I mean, how many songs can you play in one day? You know,
Right.
there's only so much time, isn't there? So I think it really helped, and I suppose general life experience helps as well. And traveling's been very good for that as well. I think, and I got a bit blasé with travel because I did a lot of it for a long time. Then when COVID came along and grounded most of us, it made me reflect and realize how much I'd gotten from it. How much good it had done me and how many people I'd met. Like getting to meet yourself at NAMM.
Yeah.
Hanging out on the other side of the world. Why is someone paying me to do that? That's far too cool a job for me. But whilst they haven't figured out that I'm not worthy of it yet, well, I'll keep doing it. So
Absolutely. I love that. So carrying on, if you were going to write a book about your career up to this point, what would you title it?
I can tell you exactly what I'd title it actually, and I can tell you why I would. So a friend of mine, he's getting married very soon. His name's Josh, and he was a very good friend of mine all the way through uni. I'm going to his stag do in a couple of months' time, and I haven't seen him for about 8 years, I think. and we only realised that the other day. And I'm really looking forward to seeing him again. He's a tremendous player. He was one of those guys that everything I did was a lot better because of him. He was an amazing person to be around. And when I was at uni, we were the kind of two of the guys who would stay up a lot and we'd chat until 4 in the morning and we'd play guitar and you get a bit deep with things. And I didn't realize that I always used to say this, but he picked me up on it eventually. And yeah, we were talking about this, that, and the other. And apparently I just said, well, it's just one of those things, isn't it? And he said, well, you say that about everything. So yeah, apparently so. So I think that's what I'd call it. I'd just call it one of them things, because apparently I say that. And I can imagine actually, yeah, because now I'm aware of it. I catch myself saying it a lot. And I have a little diary that I keep on my computer wherever I'm going, whatever I'm doing, and that's what I call it. That's a bit of a sort of silly working title, but it makes me laugh seeing a Word document on my desktop called one of them things in it. And I think, oh yeah, perhaps I'll write about this. I'm on a bullet train in China or something, I'll write about what I've just been doing for the day, what I've eaten, curried goat brains or whatever it was. So yeah, that's what I'd call it. I think one of them things, isn't it?
That's so awesome. I love that. That is one of the best answers I've ever gotten to that question, actually.
Oh well, I had a bit of pre-thought on that before, but yeah, I think that's what I'd do. That's what I'd call it.
That's awesome. So what are your plans for world domination?
Same as everyone's. Just hope it happens with very little work, I suppose. Um, but no, I think for me, the last 3-4 years of everything, it's made me really made me realize what's important in my own life, and to sort of plow my own furrow with it, I suppose. Really, I think I don't feel the need to fill the diary all the time anymore, every day, every year. I'll do less gigs. I'll be a bit more selective, maybe. Maybe not do quite as many lessons. Maybe not quite as many lectures and that kind of things. And I don't tend to do as much of that in the exams anymore. But I think it's maybe doing less of the extras and doing a smaller amount of the things I like, but try and do them better. So I suppose it's keeping on refining as best I can and keeping on learning, because it keeps your mind active, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does, and that's huge. That's one of those things that I love. I personally try to impart onto other people is like, just don't ever stop learning, don't ever stop getting into new stuff. Like, it's kind of how that's one of the secrets to a long life. I feel like is keep giving yourself stuff to learn and to do.
Yeah, definitely. Every day's a school day.
That's right. I like that. And then my last question, and just to revisit the introduction to the show. So again, it's this show not only showcases the best of independent artists, it also explores what inspires them, what drives them, and what they consider their fundamental purpose as an artist to be. So Tommy, what's your truth?
What, in terms of what inspires me?
Yeah, what drives you? What's your truth? What's your reason?
Well, as it happens, can I borrow your hand? Yeah. Sorry, my teenager is just over here, and I'll keep people guessing, so I won't put their face on camera. But this is their hand. So this is Bobby. Say hey to Johnny.
Hello.
In fact, maybe if you come here and face that way, then people won't know who you are. But you can come on and say hello.
Oh, like
So,
see ya.
yeah, come and face the harp guitar. So this is my reason. There you go.
Oh,
There you go. Note the Slipknot t-shirt. Starting them young.
that's awesome.
Are you all right, by the way? You appearing in the room. Do you need something? Oh, cool. Yeah, we'll do it in 1 minute. Yeah. Cool. All right, then. We'll see you in a minute. Little cameo there.
That's awesome.
I think as I've gotten older, so yeah, with Bobby there, I mean, they're nearly 16 now, and I think with being away a lot, as I was for quite a few years with work and stuff like that, we'd always keep in touch. I've written songs about her. We've done gigs together. We've written songs together. She's tattooed me. She's traced tattoos for me. She's actually inked me and stuff like that when she was about 11, 12. I think it's one of those things that it keeps me on the straight and narrow, because not because I'm a loose cannon or anything, but because it's very easy, I think, to be traveling all over the place and doing all this stuff. And it's fun, but after a while, what does that mean? You've gone and met this person and it was great. And we met Weird Al the other week. It was incredible. And thanks to Jim Chemo West, his guitar player, for sorting that for us. Very kind of him. I've loved Weird Al for 25 years. So it was an amazing moment for the childhood me. But at the same time, you come home and you have to remember what matters for you, don't you? And I think with them, growing up as they are, they're in the final year of their exams now, and everything they do inspires me. And I think it's a constant learning curve. So I think my truth is definitely yeah, it's family. I would say definitely.
That's awesome. I love that. Right on, Tommy. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. It's been a ride, man. This has been a really great conversation. And I've known you for a while, but I learned stuff about you that I definitely didn't know, and it was an honor. It was a treat. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Johnny. I really appreciate it. And will I see you next month at NAMM?
Unfortunately, no, I will not be there. I'll explain that and when we're done with the call, I'll explain that. But before we do go though, I did want to give you 60 seconds to plug anything that you have coming up. 60 seconds of everything Tommy Loose. Fire away.
Oh, well, thank you. So, yeah, the next thing I've got coming up, playing wise for myself, later on this year in November, I'm going to be aiming to put out an electric EP. It'll have 4 to 5 tracks on there. And I give my girlfriend Lee credit for the title. There's a bit of a story behind it. It's somewhat of a rude story, so I can always tell you what it is, but it doesn't matter if you can't include it. So basically, what it is, there was an article in the local paper where a guy decided he was tired of doing a certain thing. And so he removed a certain part of himself, thinking, I won't need to do that anymore. And I was telling her about it, and she just said, it's as if he thought to himself, I'm so confident about this, I'm not even going to Google it. So that's what it's going to be called. It's going to be called, I'm so confident, I don't even need to Google it. Because I think it's a silly title, and it makes me think of the idiot who did that. So that's going to be my new electric EP. I'm going to do that later in the year. With Smokescreen, we've got 3 or 4 new songs recorded or nearly recorded, so we're going to have a new EP later out this year too. I'll do some gigs. They'll do some gigs. I'm also working on this Gypsy Jazz pastiche album for submission with my brother, and yeah, stuff with G7th. We've got a lot more cool stuff coming up. We've got a few new things that we're launching very soon at NAMM. I won't mention what they are just yet, but it's nice to go to a trade show and have something new to show people. So yeah, there'll be some cool stuff there. And yeah, apart from that, I'm going to keep on lifting the weights. I'm going to keep on doing what I do, keep on hanging out with my teenager, and keep on working on new music and whatever else I can fit in, and keep collecting toys, I should think, as well. So there you go.
Oh yeah, man, I love it. Well, again, thanks so much for being here, and to everyone that's watching, this has been the What's Your Truth podcast. I'll see you on the next episode. Later.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you follow your own rules and you preach them on to me. But you don't think before you act, and you ain't got no business with me. You don't know. But tell me what's your truth? Oh, what's your truth?